They say success is the best revenge, but sometimes revenge is a dish best served cold, right in the middle of a crowded ballroom. When Andrew walked into her ex-boyfriend's company Christmas party, she was wearing a dress she could barely afford and carrying a heart he'd shattered 5 years ago. He thought he could humiliate her one last time. He thought she was nobody. He didn't know that the man walking in behind her, the one wearing the billion-dollar watch, wasn't just a guest. He was the owner, and he was about to teach everyone a lesson they would never forget. Grab your popcorn. You are not ready for this ending. The invitation sat on the marble kitchen island like a coiled viper waiting to strike. It was heavy cardstock, cream-colored with gold-embossed lettering that shimmered under the recessed lighting of the penthouse. The Vanguard Group requests the pleasure of your company at the annual winter gala. Andrew Sterling stared at it, her hands gripping the edge of the counter until her knuckles turned white. To anyone else, it was just a ticket to the most exclusive event of the New York holiday season. To Andrew, it was a summons to a graveyard of her old life. You've been staring at that piece of paper for 20 minutes. A deep, baritone voice rumbled from the doorway. Andrew jumped slightly, turning to see Julian leaning against the doorframe. Even in his casuals, a charcoal cashmere sweater and dark denim, Julian Sterling looked like he owned the world. And for the most part, he did. At 34, he was the silent titan behind Sterling Vanguard, a conglomerate that had quietly swallowed up half the tech industry in the last decade. But the world didn't know his face. He despised the press. He avoided galas. He was a phantom billionaire, preferring to pull the strings from the shadows while his board of directors took the flashbulbs. He walked over, his movements fluid and predatory, and wrapped his arms around Andrew's waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Are you sure you want to do this, Elle?" he whispered into her hair. "We can stay home. I'll order that deep dish pizza from Chicago you like. We can watch bad Christmas movies." Andrew leaned back into his warmth, wishing she could say yes. "I can't, Julian. If I'm going to take the chairwoman position next month, I need to know what's really happening on the ground floor. I need to see the culture without them knowing who I am. You know what the internal audit said. The toxic management in the sales division is out of control." "I know," Julian sighed, kissing her neck. "But that's not the only reason you're nervous, is it?" He knew her too well. Andrew turned in his arms to face him. Her blue eyes, usually bright with intelligence, were clouded with an old, lingering pain. "Marcus is the regional director of sales. He'll be there." Julian's jaw tightened. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He didn't know the full details, only that a man named Marcus Thorne had nearly destroyed Andrew 5 years ago. He knew that when he met Andrew, she was working 2 waitressing jobs, living in a shoebox apartment in Queens, and battling a depression so deep it terrified him. It had taken him 3 years to help her rebuild her confidence, to show her that she was brilliant, capable, and worthy of love. "If he looks at you wrong," Julian said, his voice dropping to a dangerous low growl, "I will dismantle his life, brick by brick." Andrew smiled, touching his cheek. "No fighting. I'm going as Andrew Vance, the freelance consultant. Nobody knows we're married except the legal team. I need to see if he's as incompetent as the numbers suggest. This is business, Julian." "It's never just business with people like that," Julian warned. He pulled away and checked his Patek Philippe watch. "Look, I have that emergency conference call with the Tokyo investors. It's going to run late. You go ahead. I'll meet you there around 9. You promise?" "I'd walk through fire to get to you," he said, and he meant it. "Wear the red dress." 3 hours later, Andrew stepped out of a yellow taxi in front of the Pierre Hotel on Fifth Avenue. She had purposely avoided using the town's car. If she wanted to blend in, she had to look the part of a struggling freelancer, not the wife of a man worth $40 billion. The night was bitter cold, the wind whipping off Central Park and carrying biting snowflakes. Andrew pulled her coat tighter. It was a simple wool trench. Nice, but clearly a few seasons old. Underneath, she wore a vintage crimson silk dress she'd found at a consignment shop. It fit her curves perfectly, modest yet striking, but it lacked the designer labels that the people inside would be flaunting. She took a deep breath, the cold air burning her lungs. "You are not the same girl he threw away," she told herself. "You are Andrew Sterling. You hold the controlling interest in this entire company." But as she walked toward the revolving gold doors, the memories assaulted her. 5 years ago. Christmas Eve. A parking lot outside a TGI Fridays. Flashback. "You're dead weight, Andrew," Marcus had said, checking his reflection in the side mirror of his leased BMW. He didn't even look at her as she stood there, shivering in the snow, clutching the cheap gift she'd saved up for months to buy him. "Marcus, please," she had sobbed, humiliation burning her cheeks. "I just lost my job. I just need a little support until I get back on my feet. We've been together for 3 years." "And that's 3 years too long," Marcus sneered, finally turning to her. His handsome face was twisted in disgust. "Look at you. You're pathetic. You have no ambition, no drive. I'm going places, Andrew. I'm joining the Vanguard group next month. I need a woman who fits that world. A woman who looks like a prize, not a charity case. We're done. Find your own way home." He had driven off, leaving her stranded in the snow with no money for a cab. End flashback. Andrew shook her head, physically dispelling the memory. That night had broken her. She had spent the next year sleeping on friends' couches, working double shifts, eating instant noodles. But it had also forged her. It made her go back to school at night. It made her fight for an internship at a small logistics firm, where she eventually met a quiet, intense man named Julian, who appreciated her mind before he ever saw her bank account. She pushed through the revolving doors and into the warmth of the Pierre. The grand ballroom was dripping with opulence. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the gold leaf ceiling. Massive pine trees, frosted with real silver ornaments, lined the walls. A string quartet played softly in the corner, competing with the hum of 300 wealthy voices. Andrew handed her coat to the check-in attendant. Without the heavy wool, she felt exposed. She scanned the room, clutching her small, unbranded clutch. She saw the cliques immediately. The executives in their bespoke Italian suits near the open bar. The junior associates, laughing too loudly at their boss's jokes. The wives and girlfriends eyeing each other's jewelry like sharks circling wounded seals. "Name?" a woman with a clipboard asked at the entrance to the ballroom. She looked Andrew up and down with a sneer that said, "You don't belong here." "Andrew Vance," she said, keeping her voice steady. "I'm on the guest list under consultants." The woman scrolled down her iPad, tapped a few times, and frowned. "Right. Vance, table 42. It's in the back, near the kitchen service doors." Of course it was. Andrew took the ticket and began to weave through the crowd. She kept her head high, despite the whisper she imagined she heard. She grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing tray, not because she wanted a drink, but because she needed something to do with her hands. She was halfway across the room when she heard it. That laugh. It was a laugh that used to make her heart soar, but now made her blood run cold. It was loud, performative, and utterly fake. "I'm telling you, the deal was dead in the water, until I walked in," the voice boomed. I looked the client in the eye and said, "You want to play with the big boys, or do you want to stay in the sandbox?" Bam! Signed the check right there. $2 million in commission. Andrew froze. She turned slowly toward the center of the room. There, holding court under the largest chandelier, was Marcus Thorne. He hadn't changed much, but everything about him was amplified. His suit was sharper, likely an Armani. His hair was slicked back with expensive product. He had filled out, looking more like the corporate shark he always wanted to be. He had a glass of scotch in one hand, and the other arm was draped possessively around a woman who looked like she had walked off a runway. She was tall, blonde, and wearing a silver dress that probably cost more than Andrew's college tuition. She was laughing at his story, gazing up at him with adoration. Andrew's heart hammered against her ribs. "Don't look. Just keep walking to table 42. Observe. Take notes. Wait for Julian." She turned away, trying to slip behind a large ice sculpture of a swan. But fate, it seemed, was not done with her. "Well, well, well," Marcus's voice cut through the air, silencing the group around him. "Is that—" "No, it can't be." Andrew stopped. She closed her eyes for a second, gathered her strength, and turned around. Marcus stepped away from his group, a smirk playing on his lips. He walked toward her, the crowd parting for him. He was the regional director, the star of the sales team. He owned this room. "Andrew," he said, loud enough for half the party to hear. "Andrew Vance, my God, it is you!" He stopped 3 feet in front of her, looking her up and down with that same look of assessment he had used in the parking lot 5 years ago. He looked at her simple hair, her vintage dress, her lack of jewelry. "Hello, Marcus," Andrew said, her voice surprisingly calm. "I didn't know we were hiring." "Help," Marcus laughed, glancing back at his friends, who chuckled on cue. "Or are you crashing? The catering staff entrance is around the back, sweetie." The blonde woman on his arm stepped forward, eyeing Andrew with amusement. "Who is this, darling?" "This?" Marcus gestured to Andrew as if she were a stain on the carpet. "This is a ghost from the bad old days, Chloe. This is Andrew. The girl I dated before I realized I had standards." The circle of people around them laughed. A few people sipped their drinks, watching the spectacle with cruel entertainment. Andrew felt the heat rise in her cheeks, but she didn't flinch. She thought of Julian. She thought of the 51% stock ownership in her name. "I'm here as a consultant, Marcus," Andrew said coldly, "assessing efficiency." Marcus threw his head back and laughed, a barking sound that grated on her ears. "Consultant? You? What are you consulting on? How to shop at Goodwill? Look at you, Andrew. 5 years and you're still wearing the same sad look. Still trying to fit into a world you don't belong in." He took a step closer, invading her personal space. The smell of expensive scotch and heavy cologne wafted over her. "I did you a favor that night in the parking lot," he whispered, low enough so only she could hear, but with a venom that shook her. "I cut the anchor loose, but it looks like you're still sinking. Why don't you grab a free plate of shrimp and leave before you embarrass yourself further? The security here is vigorous." Andrew gripped her champagne glass. The urge to throw it in his face was overwhelming, but she couldn't. Not yet. She needed to expose him professionally, not just personally. She needed him to hang himself. "I'm not going anywhere, Marcus," she said, locking eyes with him. "In fact, I'm very interested to hear your speech later. I hear the big boss is coming tonight. The owner." Marcus scoffed. "Please, Julian Sterling is a myth. He never shows up to these things. He sends his proxies, and even if he did come—" Marcus straightened his tie, preening. "He'd be coming to shake my hand. I'm the reason this branch is profitable." "Is that so?" Andrew asked, an eyebrow raised. "I heard the audit found some irregularities in your accounts." Marcus's face twitched. For a split second, fear flashed in his eyes, but he masked it instantly with aggression. "You watch your mouth," he snapped, his voice losing its jovial edge. "You're nobody. You're a little mouse who snuck in through the cracks. Don't pretend you know anything about business." He turned to his fiancée, Chloe. "Babe, keep an eye on her. Make sure she doesn't steal the silverware." The group erupted in laughter again. Marcus turned his back on her, dismissing her as if she were nothing. Andrew stood there, isolated in the middle of the ballroom. Her hand trembled, not from fear, but from rage. She looked at her phone. 8:15 p.m. Julian was still 45 minutes away. She was alone in the lion's den, and the lions were hungry. But what Marcus didn't realize was that he wasn't the lion. He was the gazelle, and the hunter was already in the room. Andrew navigated the sea of tuxedos and gowns, her face burning, until she reached table 42. It was exactly as the woman at the door had described. Tucked behind a large pillar, it was so close to the service entrance that every time the double doors swung open, a gust of steam and the smell of industrial dish soap washed over them. There were only 3 other people at the table. They looked like castaways on an island of wealth. "Seats taken," a young man with thick glasses mumbled, not looking up from his phone. "By a ghost or my dignity. Take your pick." Andrew managed a weak smile and sat down. "I'm Andrew, consultant." "Arthur," the man said. "IT support. The guy who fixes their servers at 3 a.m. so they can trade stocks, but apparently not good enough to sit where the air conditioning works." Next to him was an older woman named Beatrice, who had worked in archives for 30 years, and a nervous intern named Leo, who looked like he was about to throw up. This was Marcus's leadership style in a nutshell. Separate the winners from the workers. "Don't worry, dear." Beatrice patted Andrew's hand. She had seen the interaction in the center of the room. "Mr. Thorne is a difficult man. He likes to break things, people included." "He didn't break me," Andrew said, her voice hardening. She picked up a bread roll, ripping it in half with more force than necessary. "He just thinks he did." Waiters circulated with filet mignon and lobster tails for the front tables. Table 42 received rubbery chicken. Andrew barely touched her food. She watched Marcus. He was working the room like a politician, shaking hands, clapping shoulders and refilling drinks. He was charismatic. She had to give him that. It was a predator's charisma, shiny, loud, and distracting. Around 9 p.m., the lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," a voice announced, "please welcome the man of the hour, our regional director, Marcus Thorne." Applause erupted. It was enthusiastic near the bar and polite near the back. Marcus bounded onto the stage, taking the microphone with the ease of a talk show host. "Thank you. Thank you." Marcus beamed. "What a year, huh? We crushed our Q4 targets. We dominated the market. And let me tell you, it wasn't easy. It took grit. It took vision. It took me." Light laughter. Marcus winked. "But seriously," he continued, his tone shifting to mock seriousness. "Success isn't just about numbers. It's about shedding the dead weight. It's about knowing who belongs on the yacht and who belongs on the dock." Andrew felt a knot form in her stomach. He was looking directly at the back of the room, at the shadows, at her. "We have a lot of new faces here tonight," Marcus said, pacing the stage. "And some old faces. Faces that remind us of where we came from, and why we ran away from there so fast." The room went quiet. This was off script. It was uncomfortable. "I see an old friend in the back," Marcus pointed. The spotlight operator, confused, swung the beam around until it landed on table 42, blinding Andrew. She froze. The entire ballroom turned to look at her. She was a deer in the headlights, the red dress vivid against the drab background of the service station. "Andrew!" Marcus called out through the microphone, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. "Stand up. Come on. Don't be shy." Andrew remained seated, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. "She's shy," Marcus told the crowd. "Andrew here used to be. Well, let's just say she was a fixer-upper project of mine years ago. She's here tonight as a consultant. Can you believe that? From waitressing to consulting. The American dream, right, folks?" A few people chuckled nervously. Most looked awkward. But Marcus didn't stop. He was drunk on power and scotch. "Tell us, Andrew," Marcus goaded. "What's your expert consultation on the sales figures, since you're here to assess us?" Andrew stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. If he wanted a show, she would give him one. She grabbed her champagne glass, her knuckles white. She didn't shout. She projected her voice, clear and steady, a skill she had learned in boardrooms over the last 3 years. "The sales figures are impressive, Marcus," Andrew said. The room was so silent you could hear a pin drop. "But the overhead costs in the Northeast Division have risen by 200% in 6 months, specifically in client entertainment and miscellaneous travel. Interesting how the company jet logs show trips to Cabo during weeks when you claimed to be in meetings in Detroit." A collective gasp swept through the room. Marcus's smile faltered. His eyes narrowed into slits. He hadn't expected her to speak. He certainly hadn't expected her to know the numbers. "And," Andrew continued, stepping out from behind the table, "I noticed that 3 of your top accounts were signed only after significant consulting fees were paid to a shell company in the Caymans called Thorn Logistics. Is that standard protocol, Marcus?" The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. The board members in the front row were whispering furiously to each other. Marcus griped the microphone so hard the plastic creaked. He forced a laugh, but it sounded like a bark. "Wow," he sneered. "Sounds like someone has been reading too many conspiracy blogs. Security? Can we get this delusional woman out of here? She's clearly had too much of the free champagne." 2 burly security guards in ill-fitting suits started moving toward table 42. "She's drunk, folks," Marcus shouted over the murmurs. "Sad, really. Jealousy makes people do crazy things. Let's give her a round of applause for the entertainment." He started clapping. His sycophants joined in. The sound was deafening, a wall of mockery crashing down on her. Beatrice grabbed Andrew's arm. "Sit down, honey, he'll ruin you." "He's already trying," Andrew whispered, her eyes stinging with tears of frustration. She wasn't crying because she was sad. She was crying because she was furious. She had him. She had the data. But in this room, on his turf, the truth didn't matter. Only the loudest voice mattered. The security guard reached her. "Mom, you need to leave. Now! Don't touch me!" Andrew snapped, pulling her arm away. "Don't make a scene, Mom," the guard grunted, reaching for her shoulder again. Suddenly, the heavy oak double doors at the main entrance of the ballroom, the ones reserved for VIPs, slammed open with a sound like a thunder crack. The noise cut through the applause and the mockery instantly. The entire room turned toward the entrance. The air in the ballroom changed. It wasn't just a draft. It was a shift in atmospheric pressure. 6 men walked in first. They weren't the hotel security in polyester suits. These men wore earpieces and bespoke black suits that struggled to contain their bulk. They moved with military precision, Scanning the room, their eyes cold and calculating, they formed a phalanx, creating a wide path. Then he walked in. Julian Sterling didn't walk, he prowled. He was wearing a black tuxedo that was cut so sharply it looked like a weapon. He wore no tie, the top button of his crisp white shirt undone, giving him an air of dangerous nonchalance. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and his jaw was set in a line of granite. He paused at the top of the stairs, surveying the room. He didn't look like a guest. He looked like a king inspecting a rebellious province. The silence in the room was absolute. Even the string quartet had stopped playing. "Who is that?" someone whispered near the front. "Oh my God," an executive gasped. "That's him. That's Sterling." Marcus, still on stage, looked confused. He squinted against the spotlight. He had never met the owner in person. Julian was famous for his privacy. Marcus only knew the name on the checks. "Who invited the entourage?" Marcus joked into the mic, though his voice wavered. "This is a private party, pal." Julian didn't even blink. He didn't look at the stage. He didn't look at the executives. His eyes scanned the room with laser intensity, ignoring the hundreds of people staring at him. He started walking down the stairs. The crowd parted instantly, creating a wide avenue for him. It was instinctual. You didn't stand in the path of a predator. Marcus, realizing he was losing the room, tried to regain control. He hopped off the stage and jogged toward Julian, a wide plastic smile plastered on his face. "Mr. Sterling," Marcus exclaimed, extending his hand. "I assume it's you, Marcus Thorne, Regional Director. We spoke on the phone last." Julian didn't break stride. He didn't look at Marcus. He didn't shake the extended hand. He walked right past Marcus as if the man were a potted plant. Marcus was left standing there, hand in the air, looking like a fool. A ripple of shock went through the crowd. Nobody ignored Marcus Thorne. Julian kept walking. He was moving fast, his long legs eating up the distance. He was heading toward the back of the room, toward the kitchen doors, toward the shadows. The security guard who was holding Andrew's arm saw Julian coming. The guard's eyes went wide. He dropped his hand as if he had been burned. Andrew stood there, her heart hammering in her throat. She saw him. He looked furious. He looked terrifying. He looked beautiful. Julian stopped 3 feet from her. He looked at the cheap table, the rubbery chicken, the proximity to the trash cans. He looked at the tears shimmering in her eyes. His face, usually so composed, contorted with a mixture of pain and rage. "Julian," she whispered, "you're late." The billionaire, the man who made markets crash with a single tweet, the man who terrified seasoned CEOs, dropped to one knee. A collective gasp, louder than before, sucked the air out of the room. Julian reached out and took Andrew's hand, the one clenching the cheap clutch. He kissed her knuckles, his eyes never leaving hers. "I'm sorry, my love," his deep voice carried in the silent room. "The traffic was murder." "And I see." He stood up slowly, keeping her hand tucked firmly in the crook of his arm. He turned to face the room, his expression shifting from tender to lethal in a nanosecond. "I see that the hospitality here is lacking." Marcus had scrambled to catch up. He arrived at table 42, breathless and sweating. "Mr. Sterling," Marcus panted. I don't understand. You know this woman?" Julian looked at Marcus for the first time. The look was devoid of humanity. It was the look a boot gives an ant. "Know her?" Julian asked, his voice low and dangerous. He reached out and gently brushed a stray hair from Andrew's face, a gesture of such intimacy that it made the women in the room sigh and the men look away. "Gentlemen," Julian said, raising his voice so it reached every corner of the ballroom without a microphone, "I would like to introduce you to someone." He pulled Andrew closer, wrapping his arm around her waist, claiming her, shielding her. "This is not a consultant," Julian said. "This is Andrew Sterling, my wife." The bombshell dropped. People's jaws literally hit the floor. The glass Marcus was holding slipped from his fingers and shattered on the parquet floor. The sound was deafening in the silence. "And," Julian continued, his eyes locking onto Marcus's terrified face, "as of this morning, she is the new chairwoman of the board for the Vanguard Group. Which means, Mr. Thorne," Julian smiled, a cold, shark-like smile, "she is your boss." Marcus turned pale. All the blood drained from his face, leaving him looking like a wax figure. He looked at Andrew, the woman in the thrift store dress, the woman he had called a charity case, the woman he had just tried to throw out. Andrew stepped forward. The fear was gone. The hesitation was gone. She felt the warmth of Julian at her back, a solid wall of support. She looked at Marcus, then at the stunned crowd, and finally at the security guard who had grabbed her. "I believe," Andrew said, her voice ringing clear and authoritative, "we have some things to discuss. Marcus, why don't you get the microphone? I have a few more questions about those Cayman accounts." The silence in the Pierre Hotel Grand Ballroom was no longer just quiet. It was a vacuum. 300 of New York's elite, people who made their living by talking, negotiating, and schmoozing, were rendered completely mute. All eyes were glued to the tableau near the kitchen doors, the billionaire in the tuxedo, the terrified executive, and the woman in the red dress who had transformed from a ghost into a guillotine. Marcus Thorne looked as though he had swallowed a bag of gravel. He stared at Andrew, his brain misfiring as it tried to reconcile two conflicting realities: the broke waitress he had dumped in a snowy parking lot and the chairwoman of the multi-billion-dollar conglomerate he worked for. "Chairwoman," Marcus squeaked, his voice cracked, stripping him of the last shred of his carefully curated masculinity. That's impossible. The board is made up of industry veterans. You're Andrew." "I am," Andrew said calmly. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. The power in the room had shifted entirely to her. She stepped away from the service table, her heels clicking rhythmically on the hardwood floor as she walked toward the stage. Julian walked a half step behind her, a silent, looming shadow of enforcement. "I earned my MBA from Wharton while working full-time, Marcus," Andrew said, her voice projecting effortlessly. "I spent 3 years as a strategic analyst for Sterling Vanguard's acquisition team under a pseudonym. I didn't marry into this company. I worked my way up from the basement while you were busy expensing 3 martini lunches." She reached the stage. Marcus was still holding the microphone, clutching it like a lifeline. He looked at the crowd, desperate for an ally. "It's a joke," Marcus shouted suddenly, a frantic, manic grin stretching across his face. He looked at the investors in the front row. "Ha! You guys got me. This is a skit, right? Part of the entertainment. Julian, you really had me going there." "Good one, sir." He tried to laugh. It was a wet, pathetic sound. Nobody joined in. Julian stepped up onto the stage. He didn't touch Marcus. He simply held out his hand. The command was implicit. "Give it to her." Marcus's hand trembled as he passed the microphone to Andrew. "Thank you," Andrew said coolly. She turned to the AV technician at the side of the stage, a young man who looked terrified. "Connect my phone to the main screen, please. I have a presentation." "No, wait," Marcus started, stepping forward. Julian moved. It was a subtle shift of his weight, blocking Marcus's path. "Let her speak," Julian murmured. The menace in his voice was so thick it was palpable. Marcus froze, shrinking back. The massive projector screen behind the stage flickered to life. Instead of the congratulatory, "A record-breaking year," graphics Marcus had prepared, a spreadsheet appeared. Then, a series of scanned invoices. Andrew paced the stage. She looked radiant, lethal, and completely in control. "Tonight was supposed to be a celebration of profit," Andrew began, addressing the crowd. "But profit without integrity is just theft. As the incoming chairwoman, I decided to conduct a deep-dive audit into the Northeast Division. Specifically, the accounts managed personally by Mr. Thorne." She clicked a button on her phone. The screen zoomed in on a highlighted section. "This is an invoice for client retention services paid to a firm called Orion Consulting," Andrew explained. $15,000 a month for the last 2 years. The crowd murmured. That was a lot of money, but not unheard of in high-level business. "Standard practice," Marcus yelled from the side of the stage, sweat beading on his forehead. "They're top-tier consultants." "Is that so?" Andrew asked. She clicked again. A photo appeared on the screen. It was a blurry image of a run-down residential house in New Jersey. "Because this is the registered address of Orion Consulting. It's also the address of your mother's house, Marcus." The gasp from the audience was audible. "Embezzlement," a senior partner in the front row whispered, loud enough to be heard. I can explain," Marcus stammered. "It's a holding company. For tax purposes. It's legal." "Let's talk about legal," Andrew continued, relentless. She clicked the next slide. "These are flight logs for the corporate jet. August 12th to August 19th. The manifest lists a business trip to Seattle for a tech summit." She clicked again. A series of Instagram screenshots appeared. They were photos of Marcus and his fiancée, Chloe, posing on a yacht in the Mediterranean. The timestamp matched the flight logs perfectly. The caption read, "Living the high life with my love. Blessed Dahohoser CEO life. You expensed $100,000 of company money for a personal vacation, Marcus," Andrew said, her voice dropping an octave. "And you forged the client meeting reports to cover it up." The room turned on him instantly. In the corporate world, being a jerk was tolerated. Stealing from the shareholders was a death sentence. The executives who had been laughing at his jokes 5 minutes ago were now glaring at him with open hostility. Marcus looked around wildly. He saw his career incinerating in real time. He turned to the one person he thought was still on his side. "Chloe," he pleaded, looking at the blonde woman in the silver dress standing near the front. Tell them it was a business trip. You met the clients." Chloe stood there, the center of attention. She looked at the screen, where her own Instagram post was damning evidence. She looked at Marcus, sweating and desperate, stripped of his power. Then she looked at Julian Sterling, the actual billionaire who was watching the proceedings with cold detachment. Chloe made a calculation. "I didn't know," Chloe said, her voice shaky but loud. She stepped back, putting distance between herself and the stage. "He told me he paid for it. He told me he owned the jet. I had no idea he was stealing." "Chloe!" Marcus screamed, betrayed. "You liar! You helped me pick out the champagne. Don't speak to me," she snapped, pulling a massive diamond ring off her finger. "And I think this belongs to the company, since you probably stole the money for it too." She threw the ring. It hit the stage with a hollow clink and rolled to Marcus's feet. The humiliation was total. The king of the sales division was standing alone, abandoned by his fiancée, exposed as a fraud, and cornered by the owners of the company. Andrew lowered the microphone. She looked at the man who had told her she was dead weight. "You wanted to know my consultation advice. Marcus?" she asked softly. She walked over to him. He flinched, expecting a slap. Instead, she leaned in, her voice amplified so everyone could hear. "My advice is that you should have read the employee handbook, specifically the section on gross misconduct. You're fired, effective immediately." "You can't do this," Marcus hissed, his eyes bloodshot. "I built this team. I have contracts. I'll sue you. I'll sue this whole damn company into the ground." Julian stepped forward. He didn't use a microphone. He didn't need to. "Security," Julian said. The 6 men in black suits who had entered with him moved as one. They swarmed the stage. "Get him out of my sight," Julian ordered. "Take him to the manager's office. We have paperwork to finish." 2 guards grabbed Marcus by the arms. He kicked and screamed, dragging his expensive Italian shoes across the floor. "Get off me! Do you know who I am? Andrew! Andrew, you can't do this! We loved each other." His screams faded as the heavy doors swung shut behind him. The ballroom was dead silent. Andrew stood on the stage, her chest heaving slightly. It was done. The public execution was over, but the private reckoning was just beginning. Julian walked over to her. He reached out and took her hand, bringing it to his lips. "You were magnificent," he whispered. "I'm not done," Andrew said, her blue eyes flashing. "I want to look him in the eye when the police get here." Julian nodded. "Then let's go." He turned to the stunned crowd. "Enjoy the dessert," he said flatly. "The open bar is now closed." The manager's office was a small, windowless room behind the front desk, usually reserved for counting cash or scolding tardy bellboys. Now it held a pacing, hyperventilating Marcus Thorne. He had loosened his tie. His hair was a mess. He was pacing back and forth like a caged tiger, muttering to himself. "It's a misunderstanding. It's a setup. I can fix this. I just need to call my lawyer. I just need to call—" The door opened. Marcus spun around. Andrew and Julian entered. Behind them, the massive form of the head of security, a man named Ivanov, stood blocking the exit. "Lawyer won't answer, Marcus," Julian said, closing the door. "We froze your corporate assets 10 minutes ago, and since you used company funds to pay your retainer, well, let's just say your legal representation is currently pending." Marcus slumped into a chair. The fight was draining out of him, replaced by a cold, creeping terror. He looked up at Andrew. Up close, without the audience, he tried a different tactic. He tried the one thing that had always worked on her in the past. Manipulation. "Elle," he said, his voice softening, his eyes wide and pleading. "Elle, look at this. Look at us. It's crazy, right?" "Don't call me Elle," Andrew said, standing on the other side of the desk. She refused to sit. She wanted to look down on him. "Andrew," Marcus corrected himself, forcing a smile. "Okay, look, I get it. You're angry. The parking lot. Christmas Eve. I was a jerk. I admit it. I was young. I was stupid. I was stressed. But you have to admit, it made you strong. If I hadn't pushed you, would you be here? Would you be the chairwoman? In a way. I did this for you." Andrew stared at him. The sheer narcissism was breathtaking. "You think you deserve credit for my success?" she asked quietly. "You think destroying my self-esteem, leaving me stranded in the snow without a coat, making me believe I was worthless, you think that was a gift?" "It motivated you," Marcus insisted. "And look, we had good times too. Remember the trip to the Poconos? Remember when we talked about baby names? We had a connection, Andrew. You can't just throw a man in jail because of a bad breakup." He stood up, reaching for her hand across the desk. "Come on, just fire me. Let me walk away. For old time's sake. Don't ruin my life." Julian moved to intercept him, but Andrew held up a hand. She didn't need protection. Not from him. "I'm not ruining your life, Marcus," she said. "You did that yourself. You did it every time you signed a fake invoice. You did it every time you belittled a subordinate. You did it tonight when you decided to humiliate a woman just because she wasn't wearing designer clothes." She leaned in, her palms resting on the desk. "And as for old time's sake," she laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Do you know what I did after you drove away that night? I walked 3 miles to a shelter. I got pneumonia. I lost my apartment because I couldn't make rent without your half. I spent 6 months climbing out of a hole you dug for me." I didn't know," Marcus whispered. "You didn't care," she corrected. "But I met someone who did." She glanced at Julian. The love in her eyes was evident, a sharp contrast to the ice she directed at Marcus. "Julian found me working at the logistics desk. He didn't care about my clothes. He didn't care about my status. He saw me. He saw the errors in the shipping routes I was trying to fix. He listened to me." Julian stepped forward, resting a hand on Andrew's shoulder. He looked at Marcus with eyes that were black voids. "You have a debt, Mr. Thorne," Julian said, his voice deep and rumbling. "I can pay it back," Marcus blurted out. "I have savings. I have the condo in Miami." Julian shook his head slowly. "Not the money. I don't care about the money. You stole $3 million. I lose that in rounding errors on a Tuesday. No, you have a different debt." Julian walked around the desk. Marcus shrank back into his chair. "You broke my wife's heart," Julian said softly. "You made her cry. You made her question her worth. That is a debt that money cannot clear." Julian pulled a folded document from his tuxedo pocket and tossed it onto Marcus's lap. What is this?" Marcus asked, his hands shaking. "That," Julian said, "is the deed to your condo in Miami, and your leased BMW, and your portfolio." "I don't understand," Marcus stammered. "I bought your debt," Julian said simply. "Personal loans, credit cards, the mortgage. I bought it all from the banks this morning." "You don't owe the bank anymore, Marcus. You owe me, and I'm calling in the loan. Immediately." Marcus's eyes widened in horror. "But I can't pay that. I'm bankrupt." "Exactly," Julian said, "which means I own everything. The car you drove here, mine. The watch on your wrist, mine. The suit on your back." Julian raised an eyebrow. "Technically, mine." "You're going to take the clothes off my back," Marcus whispered. "No," Andrew said, stepping in. "We have more class than you. You can keep the suit. You'll need something to wear for your mug shot." There was a sharp knock on the door. Ivanov opened it. "Sir, the NYPD is here. Fraud Division." Marcus let out a sob. It was the sound of a man realizing there was no exit. The arrogance, the bravado, the carefully constructed image of the successful alpha male, it all evaporated, leaving a scared child. "Andrew, please," he wept, tears streaming down his face. "Please don't let them take me. I can't go to prison. I'm not built for prison." Andrew looked at him one last time. She searched for any feeling, pity, love, even hate. But she found nothing. Just indifference. He was a stranger, a bad memory that had finally been exorcised. "Goodbye, Marcus," she said. She turned her back on him. 2 uniformed officers entered the room. They pulled Marcus up from the chair. "Marcus Thorne," the officer asked, "you have the right to remain silent." "Andrew!" Marcus screamed as they dragged him out into the hallway. "Andrew!" The door closed, silencing his cries. The room was quiet again. The hum of the hotel ventilation was the only sound. Julian exhaled, a long breath, and turned to his wife. He adjusted his cufflinks, the mask of the ruthless billionaire slipping just enough to show the concern underneath. "Are you okay?" he asked. Andrew took a deep breath. She looked at the empty chair where Marcus had sat. She felt lighter. The ghost that had haunted her for 5 years, the voice in her head that said she wasn't good enough, was gone. It had been handcuffed and dragged away. "I'm better than okay," she said, a genuine smile breaking across her face. "I'm hungry. I barely touched that rubbery chicken." Julian laughed. It was a warm, rich sound that filled the small room. "Well, Chairwoman Sterling, I believe I promised you deep dish pizza." "That you did?" "Let's go home," Julian said, offering his arm. They walked out of the office, past the stunned hotel staff, past the ballroom, where the whispers were still swirling, and out into the cold New York night. The snow was falling again, just like it had 5 years ago. But this time, Andrew wasn't shivering. She was warm, she was loved, and she was powerful. The yellow taxi was gone, replaced by Julian's sleek black Maybach, waiting at the curb. The driver held the door open. As Andrew slid into the leather seat, she glanced back at the hotel one last time. The past was behind her. The future was wide open. And the best part? She had the best partner in the world to face it with. But just as the car pulled away, Andrew's phone buzzed. She looked down at the screen. It was a text message from an unknown number. "You think you've won? This isn't over. Marcus was just the puppet. You need to look closer at the board of directors, Andrew. The rot goes deeper than you think." Andrew's smile faded. She looked at Julian, who was pouring a drink from the car's console. "Everything all right?" he asked. Andrew locked her phone screen. The drama with Marcus was over, but the war for the company was just beginning. "Everything is perfect," she lied. "Just a spam message." She wasn't going to ruin the night. But tomorrow, the hunt would continue. The ride to the Sterling penthouse was quiet, save for the soft hum of the Maybach's engine. But the silence inside the car wasn't peaceful. It was charged. Andrew stared at the text message on her phone, the glow of the screen illuminating her furrowed brow. "You think you've won? This isn't over. Marcus was just the puppet. You need to look closer at the board of directors, Andrew. The rot goes deeper than you think." "You're frowning," Julian said, his hand resting warmly on her knee. "You just dismantled your ex-boyfriend in front of 300 people. You should be smiling." Andrew turned the phone to him. "Read this." Julian scanned the message. His expression didn't change. He didn't look surprised or angry or worried. He simply nodded, as if confirming a weather report. "I know," he said softly. Andrew pulled her hand away, shocked. "You know, Julian, someone is threatening us. They said Marcus was just a puppet. If the board is corrupt—" Julian interrupted, his voice calm and steady. "Why do you think I made you chairwoman? Do you think it was just nepotism? Do you think it was a wedding gift?" He turned in his seat to face her fully. "I have suspected for 2 years that Cyrus Vane, the vice chairman, has been funneling intellectual property to our competitors in China. But Cyrus is careful. He never leaves a paper trail. He uses proxies, low-level, ambitious, greedy proxies." Andrew's eyes widened as the realization hit her. "Marcus." "Exactly," Julian confirmed. Marcus was too incompetent to steal millions on his own. He was being fed the codes. He was being protected from above. I needed someone on the inside, someone smart enough to find the pattern, but someone Cyrus wouldn't suspect until it was too late. I needed you. Andrew felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter air. So tonight, it was a trap? It was a flush, Julian said. We flushed the rat out of the hole. Now, the snake is going to come looking for his dinner. That text message? It wasn't a threat, Andrew. It was panic. Cyrus knows his shield is gone. The car pulled into the private underground garage of their building. Julian leaned in, his eyes fierce with pride. I didn't save you tonight, Andrew. You saved the company. But the war isn't over. Tomorrow morning, at 8:00 a.m., the emergency board meeting begins. Cyrus will be there. He thinks he can intimidate you. He thinks you're just the waitress Marcus talked about. Julian kissed her forehead. Tomorrow, you show him that you are the queen. The boardroom of the Vanguard Group was on the 80th floor, surrounded by glass walls that offered a panoramic view of Manhattan. At 7:05 a.m., 12 men and women in expensive suits sat around the mahogany table. At the head of the table sat Cyrus Vane. He was 60, silver-haired, with a smile that didn't reach his cold, reptilian eyes. He checked his watch. It seems our new chairwoman is late, Cyrus sneered, addressing the board. Perhaps she got lost on the way from the cafeteria. The board members chuckled nervously. I propose, Cyrus continued, that in light of the scandal with Mr. Thorne last night, we vote to suspend Andrew Sterling's appointment pending an internal review. We need stability, not drama. I second the motion, a nervous man named Mr. Henderson piped up. All in favor? Cyrus asked, raising his hand. The double doors swung open. Andrew Sterling walked in. She wasn't wearing the vintage red dress anymore. She was wearing a tailored white power suit, sharp enough to cut glass. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant bun. Julian was nowhere to be seen. She was doing this alone. I believe, Andrew said, her voice slicing through the room, that according to the bylaws, a vote cannot be held without the chair present. And I am very much present. Cyrus slowly lowered his hand. Andrew, we were just discussing the unfortunate events of last night. We feel you might be overwhelmed. Andrew walked to the head of the table. She didn't sit. She stood over Cyrus. Get up, she said. Cyrus blinked. Excuse me? I said, get up. You're in my seat. Cyrus laughed, a dry, incredulous sound. Now listen here, young lady. You might be Julian's wife, but in this room... Andrew slammed a thick file folder onto the table. It slid across the mahogany surface and stopped directly in front of Mr. Henderson. Open it, Bill, Andrew commanded. Mr. Henderson opened the file. His face went pale. It's a transcript, Henderson stammered, of text messages between Marcus Thorne and a number listed as the architect. Andrew looked at Cyrus. Marcus was very chatty in the holding cell last night, especially after the police offered him a plea deal for giving up his boss. Apparently, the architect promised him protection. She pulled out her phone and tapped the screen. A voice, recording, filled the silent room. It was Marcus's voice, shaky and terrified. It was Cyrus Vane. He told me how to cook the books. He said if I took the fall, he'd pay me $5 million when I got out. Don't let me go to jail. The recording cut off. The silence in the room was absolute. Cyrus Vane looked at the faces of the other board members. They were recoiling from him, as if he were radioactive. This is illegal, Cyrus hissed, standing up. This is entrapment. I will destroy you. You can try, Andrew said calmly, but you'll have to do it from a cell. Ivanov? The doors opened again. The head of security walked in, followed by 2 FBI agents. Cyrus Vane, the agent said, you are under arrest for corporate espionage and conspiracy to commit fraud. Cyrus looked at Andrew with pure hatred. You're nothing, he spat. You're just a gold digger. Andrew smiled. It was a smile of pure steel. "I'm the chairwoman," she corrected, "and you're fired." As they dragged Cyrus out, Andrew adjusted her jacket. She looked around the table at the remaining, terrified board members. She finally sat down at the head of the table. "Now," Andrew said, opening her laptop. "Let's get to work. We have a company to clean up." Talk about a power move. Andrew went from being mocked at a party to cleaning house in the boardroom in less than 24 hours. That is the definition of a glow-up. She proved that true power isn't about who you know. It's about what you know and having the courage to use it. Did you love seeing Cyrus get taken down? Do you think there are other secrets hiding in the Vanguard group? If you enjoyed this story of revenge, romance, and justice, please smash that like button. Share this video with a friend who needs a confidence boost, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more dramatic stories just like this one. Thanks for watching, and remember, never underestimate the quiet ones.